Okay, let's welcome back, and we're going to be going over part 6 today. And what we're going to be talking about is your cerebellum, and this has to do with balance, dizziness, and poor coordination. So as people start to age and their brains start to age, a lot of things people, especially elderly people, will say that their balance is off and they're afraid of actually like breaking a hip. And that's a legitimate concern for people that are elderly, is falling and breaking their hip because they have poor balance coordination. So when it comes to your cerebellum, which is basically at the back of your head, that's where that part of the organ is. That has to do with balance problems. So if you're having balancing problems worsen, if your balance is off, your coordination, especially if you go out to like reach and grab a glass and they're shaking, or you reach to scratch your face and they're shaking, any kind of shaking that has to do with reaching out and grabbing something or bringing it closer is an indication that this part of your brain here is not functioning correctly. You're bumping into everything, you're getting dizzy and discoordinated, like maybe you're starting to get car sickness and you never had car sickness before. These are all signs that your brain is starting to degenerate. So the part of the brain that we're talking about right here is the cerebellum. Okay, so you can see the nose right here. So this is a front, the cerebellum is right in back. And then we talked about that vagus nerve coming up here. Now I just want to bring your attention to this right here. So this is a cerebellum, and you can see in here how this is really healthy, and you can see what's happening in here is it's actually starting to degenerate, right? It's the brain is shrinking, the cerebellum is shrinking. This person's going to have balance problems, coordination problems. They might be shaking in their hands, especially when they go out to and reach and pick up a glass or something. They're just poor coordination. So again, it's basically on the principles. Once this is degenerate, that's a permanent condition. There's nothing that we can do about that once this is degenerate. But what we can do is we can stop the neurodegeneration, if you remember, and then we can increase the arms on your neurons, so we can expand into this area here and start to repair that area. So these are basically some basic findings. Is this right here the tandem walk? Basically, this would be if you ever seen the person get pulled over to see if they're drinking or not. One foot in front of the other right here, so one foot right in front of the other. So it's basically called heel to toe. So you're putting your heel to your toe right there in a straight line. And if you can't do that, like let's say you start to tip over after 3 steps, that's an indication that you have basically your cerebellum here is starting to degenerate. And you may not even, there could be conditions where just walking like this right here, just putting your feet off balance, so they're not equally level, is going to cause you to be out of balance. So those are all indications that your cerebellum's not working right. If you bring so this would be the doctor right here, and you touch their finger and then go back to your nose. And if you're shaking, once you go back to your nose, if you're shaking here or you're shaking here, that indicates again that your cerebellum is not working. Coordination, cerebellum has to do with coordination. So if you bring your thumb to your alternate the fingers here in a rapid pace, so you can see how it's changing the fingers here. If you can't do that or you're slow, that's an indication of cerebellum degeneration. Now, one of the things I want to go over here, if you haven't seen any of my other videos, I do a lot of stuff with wheat, which is wheat comes from gluten here, gluten right here, which comes from wheat. And you recall seeing this test right here, and this is a positive. So what I want to really kind of go over here is how the body works. Is this tissue right here is all proteins, right? So depending on the different tissue, our body makes these proteins look a certain way. So right here, imagine these proteins being just like a pearl necklace, right? So we have just all these different pearl necklaces right here all lined up. And that's what you see right up here is these pearl necklaces. Then you see gliadin right here, which is basically from gluten. This comes from gluten, right? So gluten, which comes from wheat, right? So what I want you to pay attention to is this right in here. Okay, so you see what happens here is you have wheat, which has this V, P, L, and then your cerebellar tissue right here has the P or the V, P, L. So you can see the pearl necklace for 3 chains are identical. So let's draw this right down in here. So these 3 chains right here would be identical, just like what you see right up in here. Now, why is that so significant? Now, if we do some testing and coming back down to here, if your body recognizes wheat or gluten as foreign, it's going to start to attack it. Okay, so that sets up an autoimmune reaction. That's going to set up an autoimmune reaction in your gut. Now, it's also going to set up an autoimmune reaction in your brain. Now, why is that? Because your immune system only works on 3 pearls, right? So 1, 2, 3. So your body's already attacking this. It's already going after that part right there and causing inflammation. But your body cannot determine the difference between these 2 because these pearl necklaces here are identical for 3 of these pearls. So if 3 of these pearls are identical, your body, your immune system doesn't recognize the difference between doesn't recognize the difference here between wheat and your cerebellar tissue. So that's a major problem. Like, why is that a major problem? Because if you have antibodies against wheat, guess what's going to happen to your brain? It's going to start to attack it. And you're going to have these little Pac-Mans that start to attack your body. Now, what happens here, here's a graph that shows this is your thyroid. That's your thyroid right there. So this is your thyroid. And this is your immune system attacking. All these little Pac-Mans are attacking your thyroid. Okay, so it attacks your thyroid. But these same little Pac-Mans, guess what? They start to attack your tissue right here, your brain tissue, and that starts to degenerate. Now, one of the tests that I do right here is this is a test to see how aggressive your Pac-Mans are against your tissue. So this should be right here. You see this? This should be, you see that number right there? This should be less than, you see that number there? It should be less than 9. Okay, so when she first came into it, she was 4,600. So what does that mean? That means she has a lot of Pac-Mans that are attacking her brain tissue. So when you look at this on a functional level basis, there's many things that we can do to start restore your function and restore your brain and stop the inflammation and restore your neurons that start to grow. So after our program, she was way up here, 4,600. Then she dropped to 2,600. So that's a huge drop in a matter of 6 months. So with the functional medicine approach, we're really looking at your brain function and looking at all the different aspects. We're taking a polytherapy approach to see how we can get you better. So here's just basically some clinical findings that you're gonna find. Recent clumsiness in the hands, clumsiness in the feet, slight shaking when you go and reach some things. Okay, you have what they call basically termination tremors. So at the end of motion, where you reach your hand out and the end point, there's going to be some shaking right there. Okay, so this is a really critical part right here. Is this part right up in here where we talk about gluten. So if you have any kind of neurodegeneration, if your memory's going, if you have balance problems, you need to go gluten-free. I have a whole nother lecture, 2 different lectures on gluten. I go over alternatives to gluten, which is in wheat, of course. So all these things over a period of time wear down on your body, and this is why your brain is starting to neurodegenerate. So take care.